She was 27 years old and homeless, with a 7-year-old daughter whose wild orange curls caught the last light of a September sun in southern Louisiana. Everything they owned fit in 2 backpacks, one adult-sized, one child-sized, both stuffed past the point where zippers wanted to close. Everything they had left in the world was $10 in a Maxwell House coffee can with a dented lid that still smelled faintly of grounds, no matter how many times it had been washed. And with those $10, Rebecca Anderson bought a rusted houseboat that the marina owner said wouldn't last through October. The hull leaked. The cabin walls were rotting from the inside out, soft enough to push a finger through if you pressed hard enough. The marina owner, a man with sun-damaged skin and the kind of tired eyes that came from watching things fall apart, said she'd be lucky if it stayed afloat for a month before the bayou claimed it completely. But what nobody knew was that below the deck of that old houseboat, hidden in a compartment sealed for 44 years, was something that would answer questions Rebecca didn't know she'd been asking her entire life. Have you ever felt like you were being pulled towards something your whole life without understanding why? Like there was a thread connecting you to a place you'd never been, a purpose. You couldn't name a destination you'd only seen in dreams. That pull runs deeper than logic, deeper than reason, deeper than anything you can explain to people who've never felt it themselves. Harper, 7 years old, with her grandmother's red hair and her mother's quiet determination, looked at the boat and said what she always said when she recognized something true. "Mama, I think it's been waiting for us." The girl had a way of saying things that landed like stones in still water, sending ripples through everything Rebecca thought she understood about the world. Harper saw patterns where other people saw chaos. She saw intention where other people saw accident. And standing there on that dock, with the September heat pressing down and the smell of bayou water thick in the air, Rebecca wanted desperately to believe her daughter was right. What Harper couldn't see, standing there with her small hand tucked inside her mother's, was that Rebecca had been sleeping in their car for 3 weeks, parking behind different gas stations each night, so nobody would notice the pattern. She'd been washing their hair in bathroom sinks, brushing their teeth with bottled water, telling Harper they were on an adventure, while her daughter's eyes grew more hollow and her questions grew quieter. Before we go further, if stories about second chances and finding home mean something to you, hit subscribe. And tell us in the comments what state you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories reach. The breaking hadn't happened all at once. Loss never does. It comes in waves, in increments, in moments that seem survivable, until you realize you've been drowning for months and only just now noticed the water closing over your head. William Anderson died on Rebecca's 26th birthday, September 15th, 2023. Heart attack in his recliner while watching the evening news, just like doctors had warned him would happen if he didn't change his diet, didn't manage his stress, didn't take the medications that sat unopened in the bathroom cabinet, because he said they made him feel worse than the condition they were supposed to treat. Rebecca found him when she came in from her shift at Robert Miller's marine supply store, still wearing her work boots and smelling like engine oil and the particular kind of tired that comes from standing on concrete for 9 hours. The television was still on, some talking head discussing crop yields and weather patterns. Her father looked peaceful in a way he hadn't looked in the 8 years since her mother died, and she felt grateful for that, even as her hands shook so badly she could barely dial 911. They lived in the house for 11 more months, a rental property owned by a man named Bergeron, who owned 3 houses in their town and rented them to people who paid on time and didn't complain about things like the water heater that only worked intermittently or the air conditioning that gave up completely every August. Rebecca worked her shifts. Harper went to school. They ate dinner at the same table where William used to sit in silence, reading the newspaper he still had delivered, even though he could have read it online for free. They existed in the shape of the life they'd had before, but the substance was gone, leaked out through cracks Rebecca couldn't see how to seal. August 15th, 2024. Exactly 11 months after William's death, Mr. Bergeron called. His daughter needed the house. The rent was paid through the end of the month. He wasn't unkind about it, just matter of fact in the way people are when they're delivering news they know will hurt but can't afford to cushion. He had his own family to think about, his own problems to solve. Rebecca's situation was unfortunate, but it wasn't his responsibility. She had 2 weeks. 5 days later, Brandon showed up. Drunk, angry, demanding to see his kid in that particular way men have of believing their biology grants them rights they never earned through presence or care or love. Harper heard him from her bedroom, heard the slurred accusations and the pounding on the door. And when Rebecca finally called the police, her daughter's face had that blank quality children develop when they learn the adults around them can't always keep them safe. The restraining order was filed on August 20th. Brandon Walker, 32 years old construction worker, when he could stay sober long enough to hold a job, father to Harper in the technical sense, but absent in every way that mattered. The judge granted the order without hesitation. Brandon had a record long enough to make the decision easy, but the hearing had eaten up money Rebecca didn't have for a lawyer she couldn't afford. She packed their lives on August 28th. Everything that mattered fit in 2 backpacks. Everything that didn't matter got left behind for Mr. Bergeron's daughter to deal with or discard as she saw fit. Harper found the folder while Rebecca was packing the kitchen. A manila folder that had lived in the back of a drawer for so long Rebecca had forgotten it existed. Inside were drawings, boat drawings, dozens of them, some in crayon, some in marker, some in pencil, with the kind of careful shading that showed real attention to light and shadow. The girl spread them across the floor, studying each one with the intensity she brought to things that interested her. "Mama, did Grandma Linda teach you to draw boats?" Rebecca knelt beside her daughter, seeing her own childhood handwriting in the corners of some drawings, seeing her mother's distinctive style in others. Linda Anderson had drawn clean lines, elegant curves, vessels that looked like they could actually float. Rebecca's childhood attempts had the same aesthetic, the same attention to proportion and balance, even when her motor skills couldn't quite execute what her eye could see. "No, baby. We just both love them the same way." Harper picked up one drawing, a sailboat with 2 figures on the deck, labeled in child handwriting that had to be Rebecca's at maybe 6 or 7 years old. "You've always known about boats." It wasn't a question. Harper stated facts the way other children asked them, confident in observations adults often missed. Rebecca took 3 things from her father's belongings: his wool sweater that still smelled faintly of him, Old Spice and coffee, and the particular scent of someone who worked with his hands. A framed photograph from 1998, her parents young and smiling at a lake she didn't remember visiting. And Linda's folder of drawings, because Harper was right. This had always been there, this knowledge, this pull toward water and vessels, and the particular freedom that came from floating. Have you ever discovered something about a parent only after they were gone? Something that made you realize you'd been following their path all along without knowing it. Robert Miller had been good to her, better than good. He'd hired her when she was 16 and desperate for any job that would take someone without a driver's license or a car. He'd taught her everything he knew about boats, about hull design and engine repair, and the thousand small details that separated vessels that lasted from vessels that sank. He'd paid her fairly, promoted her when she earned it, trusted her with work most people wouldn't have trusted to a teenage girl. When she told him she was leaving, he didn't ask why, just nodded in that way men of his generation did when they understood more than they said out loud. Then he mentioned his brother Kenneth ran a repair shop on the bayou outside Houma, Louisiana. Said if she ever wanted to learn boats from the inside out, his brother would teach her right. Rebecca counted the money in the coffee can. $1,247 saved over 9 years of working at the marine supply store. Not enough for an apartment deposit in Mississippi, not enough for first and last month's rent anywhere decent. Barely enough to start over, but enough to get somewhere else and try. She bought 2 bus tickets on September 1st, 2024. Jackson to Baton Rouge to Houma, $143 total. Harper brought one thing from her room, a crayon drawing of a boat with 2 stick figures on the deck, labeled in purple marker, Me plus Mama. The ride south took 8 hours. Mississippi flattened into Louisiana as the elevation dropped and the air grew thick with humidity that felt like breathing through a wet cloth. The trees changed from oak and pine to cypress and tupelo, their roots standing in dark water like the legs of patient animals. Spanish moss appeared hanging from branches in long gray curtains that moved in wind Rebecca couldn't feel from inside the air-conditioned bus. Harper pressed her face to the window, watching everything with the same intensity she'd brought to the boat drawings. "It's different here." Rebecca pulled her daughter close, feeling the weight of her getting heavier as she grew. 7 years old and already too big to carry for long, but still young enough to curl into her mother's side and fall asleep with her head on Rebecca's shoulder. The bus pulled into Houma at dusk, a small concrete building beside a gas station, the kind of depot that existed in towns too small to justify anything fancier. Kenneth Miller was waiting in a dented F250, looking exactly like his brother, but with a beard that had gone entirely gray and hands that showed 30 years of marine repair work. He didn't say much on the drive to his shop, just drove with one hand on the wheel and one elbow out the window, letting the warm, wet evening air do the talking. Harper fell asleep again in the back seat, her orange curls pressed against the window, streaked with dried rain. The shop sat on a backwater inlet about 10 miles outside of town. An open-sided wooden building with a corrugated metal roof and a small dock that extended into dark water. A handful of boats were tied along the dock, a fishing skiff with peeling paint, a cabin cruiser with weed-streaked sides, an aluminum John boat that had seen better decades. And at the end of the dock, listing slightly to port, was an old houseboat. Kenneth pointed at it the way you'd point at a problem you'd been avoiding, but knew would eventually need addressing. "That's what I wanted to show you. Old Ray Phillips's place. He died 6 years back. No family. Marina's been holding it, charging slip fees to an estate that doesn't exist. They were going to scrap it next month." Rebecca walked down the dock slowly, careful not to wake Harper, who'd woken up anyway and was trailing behind her with sleepy eyes and the confused expression children get when they wake up in unfamiliar places. The houseboat was about 35 feet long. The hull was steel-painted white, originally, now mostly rust, with patches of bare metal showing through where the paint had given up completely. The cabin sat on top like an afterthought, a flat-roofed wooden structure with peeling turquoise paint and two small windows along each side. A weathered wooden door faced the dock. An old life ring hung crooked on the railing, the rope rotted but still attached, like someone had forgotten to finish removing it. The whole thing sat low in the water, weighted with whatever was inside it, and whatever water had seeped in through the hull over the years. But Rebecca could see the lines underneath the rust and rot, could see what the boat had been, what it could be again. The hull was steel, which meant it could be patched, sanded, painted. The cabin was wood, which meant it could be replaced board by board if necessary. The shape was good, low, and stable, designed for slow water, for floating, not racing. Harper woke up completely taking in the boat, with those sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Mama, is that a boathouse or a houseboat?" Rebecca almost smiled. "Houseboat, baby." The girl studied it the way she studied everything that interested her completely, without judgment, seeing what was there rather than what she expected to see. "Can we go inside?" Kenneth scratched his beard, looking at Rebecca with the kind of assessment that made her stand straighter. "Marina wants $10 for 6 years of backslip fees. Honestly, they were going to scrap it next month anyway. You want it, it's yours." Rebecca opened the coffee can in front of her daughter, letting Harper see her count out 10 $1 bills into Kenneth's palm. The metal was warm from being carried in her backpack all day, and her hand shook slightly as she counted, knowing this was either the smartest or stupidest thing she'd ever done, and having no way to know which until it was too late to choose differently. Kenneth looked at the money, looked at her, and something shifted in his expression. "You know how to caulk a hull seam." She recited what Robert had taught her word for word, the way you recite things that might save your life someday. "Yes, sir." "You know what to do if you find a breach below the waterline. Pump the bilge. Locate the source patch from outside, if possible, from inside with thickened epoxy, and a wood backer if not." Kenneth studied her for a long moment, then smiled for the first time since they'd met. "Robert said you knew your stuff. Didn't believe him till now. Come back tomorrow morning. We'll start." The cabin door stuck swollen with years of humidity, and Rebecca had to put her shoulder into it before it gave way with a groan that sounded almost human. Inside was a single small room, maybe 12 by 14 feet. A built-in bunk along one wall, the mattress rotted and stained with water damage, and things Rebecca didn't want to identify. A small galley with a propane stove that had corroded to uselessness, a table and 2 folding chairs, a few cabinets along the walls, mostly empty, the wood swollen so badly the doors wouldn't close. The smell hit her second mildew and old fabric and the sweet rot that water-damaged wood gets after enough years of slow decay. The floor felt soft in places where the plywood had started to give way. The walls showed water stains in patterns that suggested the roof had been leaking for years. It was a wreck, but it was floating, and it was theirs. Harper walked through the space, slowly touching nothing, just looking. "It smells like the pond behind Grandpa's house. The good part, not the algae part." Rebecca set their backpacks on the table and turned in a slow circle, trying to see past what was to what could be. The cabin was small, but small meant manageable. Small meant she could heat it with a single propane heater in winter. Small meant she could clean it, maintain it, control it in ways she'd never been able to control the things that happened to her in the world outside. Something about it felt right in a way she couldn't explain and didn't trust, but felt anyway the way you feel. A key turn in a lock you didn't know was there. That first night, they slept in their sleeping bags on the warped floor, the rotted mattress pushed against the wall, too disgusting to even consider using. Through the thin walls came sounds Rebecca had never heard before, frogs in chorus, so many frogs it sounded like an orchestra warming up, owls calling from the cypresses, the slow lap of water against the steel hull, a rhythm that was almost like breathing, a splash that might have been a fish or might have been an alligator, and Rebecca chose not to investigate which. Harper lay in her sleeping bag, looking up at the water-stained ceiling. "Mama, why did you buy a boat that's broken?" Rebecca chose her words carefully, the way you do when you know your daughter will remember this conversation forever. "Because I know how to fix broken things." Harper considered this serious as a judge. "Did someone fix you when you were broken?" The question landed like a punch. "Grandpa tried, and Mr. Robert tried, and now I'm trying to fix both of us, baby." Harper was quiet for so long, Rebecca thought she'd fallen asleep. Then her small voice came through the darkness. "I think we can do it." "Why?" "Because we're good at hard things." What Harper couldn't see in the darkness was that Rebecca was lying in her sleeping bag, staring at the water-stained ceiling, silent tears sliding sideways into her hair, wondering if she'd just spent their last $10 on the biggest mistake of her life, wondering if being good at hard things was enough when the hard things kept coming and never seemed to end, wondering what she'd do if this didn't work, if the boat sank, if Kenneth's brother couldn't help her, if Brandon found them, if the money ran out before she found steady work. But Harper believed they could do it, and 7-year-old children don't lie about things like that. They don't have the skill for it yet. They just state what they know to be true and trust the adults around them to make it happen. So Rebecca would make it happen, somehow. Kenneth arrived at 6 the next morning with coffee in gas station cups and beignets still warm from a bakery. Rebecca would later learn was run by a woman named Margaret, who made the best gumbo in 3 parishes. They sat on the dock and ate while the sun came up over the bayou, turning the water from black to brown to green gold. Harper helped make the list, writing in purple crayon on a piece of cardboard. Kenneth had flattened out hull cabin plumbing, electrical propane bilge pump. The girl's handwriting was getting better, more controlled, the letters smaller and more even than they'd been even a month ago. Kenneth studied the list like a general planning a campaign. 6 months if you do it right, maybe 8. You can stay on her while you work, but it's going to be rough. Rebecca met his eyes, wanting him to understand she meant what she said next. "We can do rough." Harper looked up from her drawing, adding a boat to the corner of the cardboard. "We're really good at rough, Mr. Kenneth." Something passed between the 3 of them in that moment, an understanding, an agreement, a contract, sealed not with signatures, but with acknowledgement of what was about to be asked and offered and risked. Then Harper asked the question that changed everything. "Do they have school here?" Kenneth's wife, Donna, mentioned the elementary school in town when she came by later that morning with a cooler full of ice water and sandwiches. Rebecca would need to use Ray's slip address for enrollment. Couldn't admit they were technically homeless, technically living on a boat that wasn't legally habitable, technically in a situation that might bring social services down on them if anyone looked too closely. September 8, 2024. Harper started second grade at Huma Elementary in Miss Kimberly Garrett's class, a young teacher only 26 with the kind of enthusiasm that hadn't been beaten out of her yet by budget cuts and standardized testing and parents who blamed teachers for problems that started at home. It was the first anchor, fragile but holding. The afternoon of September 3rd, Rebecca opened the bilge hatch in the cabin floor. The hatch itself was swollen and stuck, and she had to use a flathead screwdriver as a lever to pry it up. When it finally gave way, the smell that came out was like opening a tomb rust and old gasoline and stagnant water and decay. 8 inches of dark water sat at the bottom, oily on the surface, thick with sediment. Harper helped bail it out with the coffee can and a plastic bucket they'd bought at a dollar store, both of them sweating in the September heat, backs aching from the bent-over work, hands getting raw from the metal handle of the bucket. It took 2 hours to get the water out. When Rebecca shined her flashlight into the empty bilge, she saw what she expected. Rust grime, the residue of 44 years of slow leaking and inadequate maintenance. And she saw what she didn't expect. A wooden footlocker sat on a raised platform that someone had built from 2x4s and plywood positioned to keep it above the water line. The platform was rotted now, the wood soft enough to crumble when she touched it, but the footlocker itself looked intact. Brass corners tarnished green but solid, leather straps dry and cracked but still buckled. A heavy brass padlock rusted shut, the keyhole filled with corrosion. Whoever put this here had cared about keeping it dry, had built that platform deliberately, carefully, with intention. This wasn't something that had fallen into the bilge by accident. This was something that had been hidden. Harper leaned over the hatch opening, eyes huge. "Mama, it's treasure." Rebecca's heart was beating too fast the way it did when she knew something was about to change, but didn't know if the change would be good or catastrophic. "Baby, it's probably just old tools or engine parts or—" No. Harper had that absolute certainty in her voice again, that quality of stating facts rather than guessing. "It's treasure. I know it is." The way she said it, no doubt pure conviction, made Rebecca's hand shake as she climbed out of the bilge and went to find Kenneth. He came back with a hacksaw and heavy bolt cutter's tools that looked like they'd been used for exactly this kind of problem before. He looked at the footlocker, looked at Rebecca, and something shifted in his expression. "Ray was an interesting man," he said, and it sounded like the beginning of a longer story he wasn't sure he should tell. "Served in Gulf War, early 90s, Marines, came home and lived on this boat for 44 years after. Never married, never had kids. Worked as a mechanic in town. Saved everything, spent almost nothing. People used to wonder where his money went." He positioned the bolt cutters on the rusted padlock. "Guess we're about to find out." The lock broke with a shriek of metal that made Harper jump. Kenneth unbuckled the leather straps. They cracked slightly, but held and looked at Rebecca. "It's your boat. You should be the one." Rebecca lifted the lid. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth that had yellowed with age but still looked intact, were rows of small canvas bags, each one tied with twine, labeled with a paper tag in faded ballpoint ink. Dates in handwriting that got shakier as the years progressed, but stayed legible. 1974, 1975, 1976, continuing through 2018. 44 bags total, though 2 years were missing, 1989 and 1997, gaps in the sequence that felt somehow significant. Harper picked up one labeled 1982, her small hands struggling with the weight. "Mama, it's really heavy." Rebecca untied the twine on the first bag, 1974, the earliest one, and opened it. Silver coins spilled into her palm: Walking Liberty, $50, Morgan silver dollars, Mercury dimes, packed so tightly they'd left impressions on each other. She opened another bag. 1985. Paper money. This time, old bills folded in half with rubber bands that disintegrated when she touched them. 20s and 50s and hundreds, the kind with smaller portraits and different security features than modern bills. A third bag. 2003. Mixture of coins and bills packed so full the canvas seams were straining. Kenneth made a sound in his throat. "We need to count this, and we need to do it right." It took 2 full days. Kenneth brought a coin dealer from Thibodeau, an older man who'd been appraising estates for 40 years and knew his business. Harper helped sort the coins into piles. This pile is $50, this pile is dimes, this pile is quarters, while the adults handled the silver and the cash. The dealer worked slowly, examining dates and mint marks, testing silver content with acid that left tiny marks on coins nobody would ever spend. He made notes in a ledger, added numbers, double-checked his math. The total came to $52,800. Rebecca heard the number but couldn't process it, couldn't make it mean anything real, couldn't connect those words to the reality of sitting on a rusted houseboat with her daughter and $1,200 left in a coffee can and no plan beyond hoping Kenneth's brother's generosity would last long enough for her to find her feet. Beneath the last canvas bag, at the very bottom of the footlocker, was a folded American flag and a sealed envelope. The flag was the kind they gave families at military funerals, perfectly creased, tucked into a triangle. The blue field with its white stars positioned exactly right. The envelope was yellowed, addressed in handwriting that matched the dates on the canvas bags. "To whoever finds this." Rebecca's hand shook as she opened it. Harper leaned against her shoulder, trying to read along, but not quite able to make out the cursive. The letter inside was 2 pages, front and back, written in the same shaky handwriting. "My name is Raymond Phillips, born Cocodrie, Louisiana, 1947, United States Marines, 1988 to 1992. I served in the Gulf War. I came home in 92 with a head full of things I couldn't put down and didn't know how to carry. The only place I could put them down was on this boat, on this water, where it was quiet enough to think and small enough to handle. I bought this boat in 1974 with money I'd saved before the war for $600. I lived on her for 44 years. Every year I saved what I could in a bag with that year written on it. I don't have family. The men I served with are mostly gone or scattered. There is no one to leave this to. So I am leaving it to whoever finds it. If you found this footlocker, you came onto my boat for a reason. Maybe you needed a place to be. Maybe you were trying to build something. Maybe you were just lost. I was all of those things once. I hope this helps. The boat is a good one. She has carried me a long way without ever moving from her slip. Some boats are like that. Some lives are like that. Take care of her. Raymond Phillips, March 14th, 2018. Harper's voice was small and certain. He left it for us. Rebecca's throat was too tight to speak. She just pulled her daughter close and pressed her face into that wild orange hair and tried not to cry in front of Kenneth and the coin dealer and the whole impossible reality of what had just happened. Harper wasn't done, but we needed it, so he left it for us. Child logic that was also perfect truth, the kind of clarity adults spend years trying to recapture and never quite manage. Sometimes, kindness doesn't come from people who know your name. Sometimes it comes from strangers who understand what it means to be drowning and throw you a rope anyway, even knowing they'll never see you use it. Kenneth drove them to Houma First National Bank on September 9th. Rebecca walked in with the canvas bags in a paper grocery sack, feeling like a criminal even though she'd done nothing wrong. The teller was young, maybe early 20s, and the sight of that much cash in old bills and silver coins made her eyes go wide enough to call the manager immediately. The manager turned out to be Margaret Beaumont, 56 years old, who ran both the bank and a Cajun restaurant downtown, and seemed to have fingers in every pie that mattered in 3 parishes. She read Ray's letter slowly, her finger tracing the lines like she was trying to memorize them, and when she finished, she handed it back with the kind of care you'd use for something sacred. Ray Phillips was good people, kept to himself, but good people. You take care of that boat, you hear? Rebecca deposited $52,000, kept $800 in cash for immediate supplies, and for the first time in her life saw a bank balance with 5 figures and felt the world shift slightly on its axis. 3 days later, Kenneth got a phone call at the shop. A man's voice asking about Rebecca Anderson and her daughter Harper, saying he was the father, that he had rights, that he'd been trying to find them. Kenneth's face went hard in a way Rebecca hadn't seen before. Nobody here by that name. After he hung up, "We need to talk." Brandon had tracked them through bus ticket records he'd somehow subpoenaed, through Rebecca's last paycheck from Robert's shop, which listed the forwarding address, through Harper's school enrollment, which showed a transfer to Houma Elementary. He'd filed for emergency custody in Mississippi on September 10th. The claim was brutally simple. Mother unstable homeless, living in unsafe conditions with minor child. The court date was October 10th, 4 weeks away. Kenneth's expression was grim. You need a lawyer, and you need to show that Judge Harper's got a stable home. Harper overheard. She'd been sent home early from school that day with a stomach ache that was probably fake. The girl was good at recognizing when she needed to be somewhere and making it happen. And she'd been hidden on the deck, listening through the gap in the cabin wall boards. The next day at school, she told Miss Kimberly everything. My daddy wants to take me away from Mama, but Mama didn't do anything wrong. Miss Kimberly was legally required to call social services. There was no choice in it, no room for judgment or mercy or understanding. The law said certain things had to be reported, and young teachers who wanted to keep their jobs didn't argue with the law. Michelle Roberts arrived on September 16th without warning. 29-year-old social worker for 6 years, burned out enough to be cynical, but not quite cynical enough to stop caring completely. She saw the boat listing in the water, saw the rotted mattress on the deck airing out in the sun, saw the broken propane stove, saw the mildew on the cabin walls, saw Harper's sleeping bag still on the floor because there wasn't anywhere else for it to go yet. Rebecca tried to explain. We're renovating. I have money saved now. I have a plan. Give me time. Michelle's face was professionally neutral, which meant bad news coming. Miss Anderson, I understand, but I have to file a report. I need to see significant progress in 2 weeks, or I'll have to recommend temporary placement while the custody case is—" She stopped mid-sentence when Harper walked up from the school bus holding Miss Kimberly's hand. The girl was in her school uniform, clean and pressed, because Rebecca ironed it every night, no matter how tired she was. Backpack on both shoulders, the right way, the way they'd practiced. Hair brushed into something resembling order, though the curls fought every attempt at control. Miss Kimberly spoke before anyone asked. "Harper's doing excellent in class. Straight A's in math. She's thriving." Michelle wrote in her notepad for a long time. Didn't commit to anything, just wrote and left. That night, after Harper was asleep, Rebecca sat on the deck with her head in her hands, trying not to make sounds that would wake her daughter. Trying to figure out how to do in 2 weeks what needed 6 months. Trying to understand how she was supposed to build a home fast enough to satisfy a court system that had already decided she was failing. Kenneth found her there. "You thinking about giving up?" The question was gentle but direct, the way questions need to be when there's no time for dancing around the truth. "I'm thinking I don't know how to do this fast enough. 2 weeks the hull alone needs—" "Then we don't do it alone, and we do it faster. I can't pay people." Who said anything about paying? The next day Kenneth called Margaret, explained the situation in the shorthand people use when they're asking for help and don't want to waste time on details that don't matter. Woman and her little girl, living on Ray's old boat, ex trying to take the kid, social services breathing down her neck. She's good people, real good people, but she needs help. Margaret didn't hesitate. "How much time we got?" 2 weeks. "I'll make calls." By September 18th, Margaret had organized a community workday for September 21st, Saturday. Kenneth told Rebecca the bayou took care of its own, and, whether she knew it or not, she was bayou now. That night, Harper drew a picture of the boat and wrote underneath, in her careful second-grade handwriting, "Our house getting better." Rebecca taped it to the cabin wall, the first decoration, the first sign that this wreck might become something worth staying for. She lay in her sleeping bag that night, listening to Harper breathe through the thin wall that separated their sleeping spaces, and felt something shift in her chest. Not hope. Exactly, hope was too fragile, too easily broken. But something smaller and harder, determination maybe, or just the stubborn refusal to let the world take one more thing from her daughter. The bayou sounds came through the walls, frogs and owls and water. The boat rocked slightly in a wake from something moving through the darkness. And for the first time since William died, Rebecca fell asleep without crying first. Saturday morning arrived with the smell of diesel and coffee. Kenneth's truck pulled into the marina at 5 in the morning bed, loaded with lumber and tools and paint cans that rattled against each other as he backed up to the dock. Rebecca was already awake. She hadn't slept much, couldn't stop calculating how much work needed doing and how little time they had to do it. By 7, the parking lot looked like a construction convention. 17 people showed up, most of them strangers to Rebecca, all of them connected through the invisible web that made small communities either your salvation or your prison, depending on which side of the web you landed on. Margaret arrived in a catering van, the back filled with industrial coffee urns and boxes of boudin and craquelins. She moved through the gathering crowd with the authority of someone who'd been organizing people for decades, assigning tasks before anyone thought to ask what needed doing. Christopher Landry came with his brother and a toolbox that looked older than Rebecca. Crawfish fisherman by trade, carpenter by necessity, the kind of man who'd rebuilt his own house after Hurricane Katrina, and never thought to mention it unless someone asked directly. Donald Bro arrived last, moving slowly, 82 years old and still showing up because showing up was what you did when the bayou called in a favor. Retired tugboat captain knew Ray Phillips since they were boys in Cocodrie, carried stories in his head that nobody had bothered to write down. Miss Kimberly came on her day off, young enough to still believe showing up made a difference, old enough to have seen enough classroom crises to know when a child needed their whole community to prove they mattered. Robert Miller drove 4 hours from Mississippi because his brother called and said the girl he'd trained was in trouble, and you didn't ignore that kind of call. Margaret clapped her hands once, sharp enough to cut through the morning conversation. "Listen up. We got 2 weeks to make this boat livable enough for social services to leave this woman and her girl alone. That means we work smart, we work fast, and we don't waste time arguing about how to do things. Kenneth's running point: you do what he says." Questions? Nobody had questions. Kenneth divided them into teams with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before. Team 1, hull work. Pull the boat out of water using the winch system, power sand the rust patch holes with marine epoxy. Team 2, plumbing. Install the new freshwater tank Kenneth had sourced from a marine supplier in New Orleans. Rig up a hand pump, figure out gray water drainage that wouldn't poison the bayou. Team 3, gut the cabin, rip out everything rotted, remove the corroded stove, scrub mildew until the wood showed its original color or gave up completely. Harper woke to the sound of powered tools and voices, stumbled out of the cabin in her pajamas with her hair doing things that defied physics. She took in the scene, the crowd, the equipment, the organized chaos, and her eyes went wide. "Mama, what's happening?" Rebecca knelt down to her daughter's level. "Remember how I said the bayou takes care of its own? These are our people now." The girl processed this with her usual seriousness, then nodded once and went back inside to get dressed. When she emerged 10 minutes later, in shorts and a t-shirt that said Homa Elementary across the front, she walked straight to Kenneth. "What's my job?" He looked down at her with something like respect. "You're on water duty. Everybody working is going to get thirsty. You make sure they got water. You make sure they got snacks. You make sure nobody passes out from heat. Can you handle that?" "Yes, sir." "Then get to work." Harper spent the morning moving through the crowd with a cooler on wheels, handing out water bottles and granola bars and pieces of boudin wrapped in wax paper. She learned names, remembered faces, asked questions about what people were doing and why they were doing it that way. Christopher showed her how to tie a clove hitch, his weathered hands moving slowly enough for her to follow. "Your mama knows boats. You need to know boats too, share." She practiced on a dock cleat until she got it right, then moved to a bowline, then a sheet bend. Knots were just patterns, and patterns made sense to her in ways words sometimes didn't. Donald watched her work for a while, then called her over. He was sitting on an upturned bucket in the shade, supposedly supervising, but mostly just being present. "You know about the man who owned this boat before you?" Harper shook her head. "Name was Ray Phillips. Quiet man, like your mama. Quiet people are the ones who see things." She considered this. What did he see? He saw this boat was worth saving, just like your mama sees you're worth saving. The girl's face went still, in that way children's faces do when adults say something true they hadn't known how to name. She didn't respond, just nodded and went back to her water duty. But something had shifted in how she carried herself. The boat came out of the water at noon, winched up onto heavy wooden blocks in Kenneth's yard, with a groaning of cables and timbers that sounded like the hull was protesting its own rescue. Out of the water, it looked worse than Rebecca had imagined. The rust went deeper than the surface, eaten through in patches, where the steel had given up fighting the bayou. The patches from decades ago, sheet metal, screwed in place by someone who knew just enough to be dangerous, were still holding, but barely. Margaret called lunch at 12:30. Long tables appeared from somewhere, covered in checked tablecloths that didn't match but didn't need to, gumbo in 3 different pots because Margaret believed in options, jambalaya that had been simmering since dawn, boudin and cracklins and fresh French bread that someone had driven to a bakery in Thibodeau to pick up. Sweet tea in gallon jugs, so sweet it made your teeth ache. Rebecca sat with Harper in her lap, surrounded by people who'd been strangers a week ago and now knew more about her life than she'd ever planned to share with anyone. The conversation flowed around her in the particular rhythm small communities develop, half English, half French, all of it coded with references to people and places and events she'd need years to understand fully. Donald leaned back in his chair looking at the boat on the blocks. Ray would have liked this, seeing his boat filled with people again. Someone asked whether Ray had always been alone. The old man's face did something complicated. Not always, but that's a story for another day. The pause felt significant, weighted with information being deliberately withheld. Rebecca filed it away to think about later when there was time for thinking about anything other than the immediate crisis. By 7 that evening, the transformation was visible. Hull stripped to bare metal holes, patched first coat of gray epoxy primer applied. Cabin gutted to the steel frame and deck, 3 bags of rotted material hauled away. New water tank installed, plumbing roughed in, old electrical panel removed and bagged for disposal because nobody wanted to risk touching something that had been corroding for 44 years. Michelle Roberts arrived at 6:45 unannounced, as always. She took in the scene, the boat torn apart, the crew covered in paint and rust dust. Harper, in safety goggles that were comically oversized, helping Christopher coil rope with the kind of concentration surgeons bring to delicate procedures. Rebecca's jaw tightened. "You said 2 weeks. This is day 1. Michelle watched Harper demonstrate a bowline to Christopher's brother, her small hands moving with confidence. Watched Margaret hand the girl a bottle of water and ruffle her hair with casual affection. Watched Kenneth show Robert something on a blueprint. 2 brothers who'd chosen different states but the same trade, finding common ground in marine repair diagrams. The social worker wrote in her notepad for longer than seemed necessary, then closed it without comment and left. Margaret watched her drive away. "That woman's got ice water running through her veins." Kenneth shook his head. "She's got a job to do. So do we. Back at it tomorrow." Sunday brought a smaller crew, 8 people instead of 17, but the same intensity. The hull got its second coat of primer, then the first coat of paint. Deep midnight blue, almost black, the color Harper had chosen without hesitation when Kenneth asked what she thought. Like the ocean at night. Rebecca had been surprised. "Why that color?" "Because Grandpa took us fishing once at night. Remember? You said the dark water was the safest color because that's where the big fish sleep and nothing bothers them." She didn't remember saying that Harper had only been 4, but the girl's memory for words was flawless and selective, keeping what mattered and discarding what didn't. Monday arrived with school and routine and the return to normal life that felt anything but normal. Harper got on the bus at 7:45, wearing her uniform and carrying her backpack, and trying very hard to look like just another second grader going to just another day of elementary school. Free drawing time came at 10:30. Harper had been working on a detailed picture of the boat. Getting good at boats, the teacher noticed really good, the kind of good that suggested natural talent rather than just practice. The proportions were right, the perspective was developing, the details showed observation skills beyond her years. Tyler Morrison leaned over from the next table. 8 years old, held back once already, the kind of kid who'd learned early that making other people small was easier than making himself bigger. What's that supposed to be? Harper didn't look up. My house. That's a boat. You can't live on a boat. That's weird. The classroom noise didn't stop, but it shifted. Other kids were listening now, the way children always know when someone's about to get hurt and can't look away from it. Harper kept drawing. It's a houseboat. It's not weird. Tyler's voice got louder, performing now. You're weird. Your hair's weird. Your house is weird. Does your house even have a bathroom? Or do you poop in the water like fish? Laughter erupted. Not from everyone, but from enough kids to make it feel like everyone. Harper's face went red, but not from embarrassment. Rebecca had taught her daughter to recognize her own anger and name it before it named her. The girl's hands curled into fists, pencils forgotten. She started to stand up. Miss Kimberly was there before the movement finished. Tyler, that's enough. Harper, can you help me with something in the hall? In the hallway, Harper wouldn't talk. Just stood there with her arms crossed and her jaw set, looking exactly like Rebecca when she had decided conversation was a waste of time. Miss Kimberly recognized the expression. She'd seen it on dozens of kids who'd learned that talking about problems just made adults ask questions that didn't have good answers. You don't have to tell me what you're feeling, but if you want to draw it, I'll sit with you. Harper drew aggressively, pressing so hard the paper tore twice. Drew the boat with 2 stick figures on deck 1 with orange scribble hair. Drew Tyler as a tiny figure far away on shore, getting smaller with every stroke. The teacher recognized pain when she saw it, recognized the particular hurt that comes from being mocked for circumstances beyond your control. She made a note to talk to Tyler's parents, knowing it wouldn't help, but required by policy to try anyway. Harper got off the bus that afternoon different, quieter. She walked to the boat with her backpack dragging on one shoulder, which was how Rebecca knew something had broken inside her daughter's carefully maintained composure. Dinner was leftovers. Margaret's jambalaya reheated on the new propane camp stove Kenneth had set up. They ate in silence, Harper pushing rice around her plate without actually eating it. How was school? Fine. Learn anything good? No. The silence stretched out thick and uncomfortable. Then Harper's voice, small and cracked. Mama, am I weird? Rebecca's heart cracked, but her voice stayed steady. Who said that? Kids at school. They said boats aren't real houses. They said my hair is weird. She put down her fork and knelt in front of her daughter, making eye contact the way you do when you need words to land and stick. Baby, you want to know a secret about your hair? Harper nodded. Grandma Linda had hair exactly like yours, wild and orange and beautiful. People told her it was weird too. You know what she did? What? She wore it proud, because it wasn't weird. It was hers. Rebecca pulled out the photograph from 1998, Linda Anderson at 34, with a mass of orange curls that looked like controlled chaos. Harper touched the photo gently, tracing her grandmother's face. She looks like me. You're not weird, Harper Anderson. You're exactly who who you're supposed to be. And anyone who doesn't see that isn't worth your time. Have you ever been judged by people who didn't know your story? If you've ever felt like you didn't fit in, drop a heart in the comments. You're not alone. That night, Harper added to her drawing before bed. The boat stayed the same, the two figures stayed the same, but now there were many more figures on the dock. Christopher, Margaret, Kenneth, Donald, Miss Kimberly, each one labeled in careful printing. She titled it at the top, "My Weird House and My Weird Family." Rebecca taped it next to the first drawing on the cabin wall. Two pieces of paper now side by side, charting a journey from alone to surrounded in the space of 3 weeks. The deep work began on September 24th, boat still on blocks in Kenneth's yard. Rebecca working dawn to dusk while Harper was at school, her daughter joining her after 3:30 to help in whatever ways 7-year-old hands could manage. Becca taught her everything the way Robert had taught her, with patience and precision and the understanding that knowledge transferred through hands more reliably than through words. This is phosphoric acid. It converts rust into iron phosphate, which doesn't spread. You wear gloves because it'll eat through your skin given enough time. Harper in safety goggles that slid down her nose every 30 seconds. I look like a bug. You look like someone who's learning to build things. The girl helped mix epoxy, learning consistency by feel. Like peanut butter, right, Mama? Not too runny. Exactly right. They developed a rhythm over the weeks. Rebecca at 6 in the morning, coffee from Kenneth's shop, working alone in the quiet before the world demanded things from her. Harper arriving at 3:30, straight from the school bus, doing homework on an upturned bucket, while her mother sanded and sealed and rebuilt. Dinner at 6, usually something Margaret had dropped off because the woman had apparently decided feeding them was her personal mission. Bath for Harper in the marina bathroom at 7, Rebecca carrying towels and clean clothes. Reading time at 8, the two of them in sleeping bags on the cabin floor because there wasn't anywhere else yet. Harper asleep by 9, Rebecca planning the next day's work by flashlight until her eyes wouldn't focus anymore. October 1st brought the color decision. Kenneth had the primer coats done, needed to know what color paint to order. "What are you thinking?" Rebecca turned to Harper. "What do you think, baby?" The girl didn't hesitate. "Dark blue, like the ocean at night." "Why?" "Because you told me dark water is the safest color, where the big fish sleep and nothing bothers them." Kenneth drove them to the marine supply in Houma. The paint mixer was an older man who'd been blending custom colors for 3 decades and could read people well enough to know what they needed before they asked. He looked at Harper, looked at Rebecca, disappeared into the back, returned with a quart of midnight blue so deep it looked black until the light hit it. Right then showed depths and variations that suggested ocean trenches and safe harbors and water that held things up instead of pulling them down. Rebecca painted a test stripe on the bare hull, stepped back. Harper stood beside her, both of them studying it in the October sunlight. "That's it? That's the one." It was the color of water at night when nothing could hurt you, the color of sleep without nightmares, the color of safety. They painted together over 4 days. Harper had her own brush, small enough for her hands, used it for detail work around the fittings and seams. She painted her name in tiny letters on the stern, Harper's boat. Rebecca didn't correct her, instead added beneath it in her own careful handwriting and Becca's. Then added one more line and Ray's. "Is Mr. Ray family now?" "Yeah, baby, he's family too." 3 coats of midnight blue paint. By October 5th, the hull gleamed like new, and people who passed Kenneth's yard stopped to look at it because it didn't look like a restoration anymore. It looked like something being born. October 6th brought the journal. Harper was exploring the cabin framework while Rebecca worked underneath the hull, checking for any spots she'd missed. The walls were up, but not finished, just plywood and studs, leaving gaps where electrical and plumbing would eventually run. The girl found a loose board in the wall cavity behind where the bunk would eventually be. Behind it, tucked into the space between studs, a waterproof Ziploc bag, yellowed with age, but still sealed. Inside was a composition notebook, black and white marbled cover, the kind schools sold for $1. "Mama, I found Mr. Ray's diary." Rebecca climbed out from under the hull, wiping grease off her hands. The notebook was labeled on the cover in neat block letters, "Property of R. Phillips, 1974. That evening, they sat on the deck, first time sitting instead of working. First time taking a moment to breathe instead of pushing toward the next task. The sun was going down over the bayou, turning everything golden, and Harper leaned against her mother's side while Rebecca opened the journal. The entries were sparse. Ray Phillips hadn't been a man who needed to fill pages with feelings. Mostly repair logs. January 3, 1979, replaced bilge pump. Weather notes, February 1980. Ice on deck first time in 20 years. Bird sightings, April 1983. Osprey nested on piling. Occasional sketches of boat parts, not diagrams. Technical details that showed someone who thought with his hands, but scattered throughout mentions of a name that made Rebecca's breath catch: Linda's designs. The Anderson woman. Elena's daughter. Wait, the outline says Linda, not Elena. Let me check, yes. Linda Anderson is correct. References to Linda Anderson, Rebecca's mother. She turned pages faster, now looking for more. Found it in an entry from March 1987. Saw Linda Anderson at boat show in Jackson. She was selling her husband's marine designs. Smart woman, knows clean lines. June 1994. Ran into Linda at Robert Miller's supply store. Her daughter, Beth Becky. No, Rebecca was with her, maybe 9 years old, drawing boats on receipt paper while her mama ordered epoxy. Linda showed me the girl's drawings. Same clean lines her mama has. Told Linda that girl's got water in her blood. Rebecca's hands were shaking. She remembered that day, vaguely distantly, the way you remember things from childhood that seemed ordinary at the time. Being bored at the marine supply store, drawing on whatever paper she could find. Her mother talking to some man with kind eyes who looked at her drawings like they mattered. November 1998. Got call from Robert Miller. Linda died. Brain aneurysm. Only 39 years old. Left a husband and daughter. That little girl who drew boats. I keep thinking about her. Hope somebody teaches her right. Entry from 2016. Ran into Robert Miller at Marine Supply in Houma. He was visiting his brother Kenneth. Asked about Linda's daughter. Robert says she's working for him now. Rebecca Anderson, 19 years old. Good with boats, he says. Knows her epoxy, knows her lines. I wanted to reach out, tell her I knew her mother, but what would I say? I'm an old Marine who met your mother at a boat show 30 years ago, so I say nothing, but I keep saving, just in case. Final entry, March 14th, 2018. The same date as the letter, I'm 71. Heart's not good. Doctor says maybe 6 months, maybe a year. I think about Linda Anderson sometimes, about that little girl drawing boats on receipt paper. I'm leaving everything to whoever finds it. But if I'm honest, I hope it's someone who needs it the way Linda's girl might need it. I hope it's someone with water in their blood. Arp. But what Rebecca couldn't tell Harper in that moment was that she was crying because she finally understood she wasn't lost. She'd been following a path her mother had laid out 30 years earlier, and Ray had been waiting at the end of it with a gift she didn't know she needed. Harper pressed against her mother's side. He knew Grandma Linda. Rebecca's voice came out rough. Yeah, baby, he knew her. And he left this for us because of her. I think so. So Grandma Linda led us here, even after she was gone. Child wisdom that cut through complexity and found truth. Rebecca pulled her daughter closer and let herself cry while the bayou sang its evening songs and the boat rocked gently on its blocks. Donald showed up the next morning, moving his 82-year-old body carefully down the dock. Kenneth must have called him, told him about the journal, because the old man's face said he'd been expecting this conversation. Did you know Ray knew my mother? He settled onto an upturned bucket with the slow precision of someone whose joints protested quick movements. Ray didn't talk much, but one night late, we were drinking rum on my porch. He told me about a woman named Linda, said she was the smartest person he'd ever met besides his drill sergeant, said she understood boats the way most people understand breathing. He said he loved her. Not like that. He said she was married, had a kid. He was too broken from the war anyway. But he loved her the way you love someone who sees you as human when everyone else sees you as damaged. Rebecca, let that settle. And he left this boat hoping I'd find it. He left it for whoever needed it most, but yeah, he hoped it'd be you. How many people do you think are watching over you right now in ways you'll never fully understand? Sometimes the kindest thing someone can do is save pieces of you before you even know you need them saved. October 8th brought weather warnings, tropical storm. Nadine had been brewing in the Gulf for 3 days, strengthening faster than meteorologists had predicted. By evening, it was upgraded to a Category 3 hurricane with projected landfall near Houma on October 10th, the same day as the custody hearing. Kenneth found Rebecca at the shop, his face grim. We got 2 choices. Get the boat back in the water and tie her down, or leave her on blocks and pray the wind doesn't flip her. She's not ready for water. Cabin's not sealed. Windows aren't. She's not ready for 110-mile-per-hour winds on blocks either. At least in water she's got weight, got flex. They launched at midnight on October 9th. Kenneth, Christopher, and Rebecca working in the dark, winching the boat back into the water with every line screaming tension. Testing the bilge pump, it worked. Installing a backup pump powered by batteries. Tying the boat to pilings with every line they had, Christopher using knots Rebecca was just learning the names of. Harper was with Margaret at the restaurant inland in a brick building that had survived Katrina and would survive this. Rebecca refused to leave the boat. Kenneth looked at her. You don't have to do this. Neither do you. But here we are. They covered the exposed cabin with tarps and plywood, creating a tent that would either hold or tear apart. No way to know which until the storm decided. The first bands of rain hit at 1 in the morning. By 2, the wind was strong enough to make standing difficult. 3:30, one of the pilings cracked with a sound like a gunshot. The boat swung violently momentum, carrying it into the dock, hard enough to shake the entire structure. Rebecca felt it through her feet impact, then the groan of stressed metal. Then water started coming in. She dove into the flooded cabin waist-deep already. Bilge pump screaming, but losing the fight. Had to go underwater to find the breach, feeling along the hull with her hands because she couldn't see anything in the dark churning water. Found it crack in the hull 8 inches long, water screaming through under pressure. Surfaced, gasped. "Plywood backer epoxy! Now!" Kenneth handed materials through the tarp opening, rain pouring around him. Rebecca dove again, working underwater, positioning the plywood against the inside of the hull exactly where the crack was. Mixed fast-cure epoxy by feel, no time for measuring, no time for precision, just getting it thick enough to hold and pressing the backer against the breech. Held it for 90 seconds while her lungs burned. Surfaced. Dove again. Second coat of epoxy, wider spread. Third time, reinforcing the edges. Exactly the way Robert had taught her 11 years ago. Exactly the way she'd explained to Kenneth on her first day patch from inside with thickened epoxy and wood backer. 2 hours of work while the storm raged, hand pumping the bilge while the epoxy cured because the electric pump couldn't keep up. Kenneth trying to help, but this was one-person work, technical and cramped, and requiring a kind of focus that came from knowing your daughter was safe somewhere else, and this boat was the only thing standing between you and losing her. Dawn came gray and still raining, but the wind was dying. Kenneth had expected to find the boat sunk, Rebecca drowned. Instead, found her sitting on the deck, soaking wet, shivering hard enough, her teeth-chattered lips blue from cold and exhaustion. The boat was floating. 15-degree list from the water she hadn't been able to pump out yet, but floating. He didn't say anything, just looked at her and nodded once the way men communicate respect when words would diminish it. Behind them, Margaret's truck appeared through the rain, pulling into the parking lot too fast. Harper jumped out before it fully stopped running down the dock. "Mama!" Rebecca caught her daughter, held her tight enough to hurt. "I told you, I know how to fix broken things, baby." The custody hearing got postponed to October 17th, 1 week. The storm had bought them time, but destroyed progress. The boat was damaged, the cabin was soaked, they'd lost days of work they couldn't afford to lose. Kenneth called in every favor he had. By October 10th at noon, 20 people were on site. By evening, the boat had been resecured, pumped dry, and a full crew was scheduled to work around the clock in shifts for 7 straight days. Cabin roof went up on days 1 and 2, marine plywood rolled roofing small skylight that would bring natural light into the space below. Windows installed on day 3, finally sealing the cabin from weather. Door hung on day 4, solid cedar that closed with a satisfying click. Interior work on day 5, built-in bunk for Harper with drawers underneath, bench seating with storage drop-leaf table that folded against the wall when not in use. Electrical on day 6, solar panels on the roof, battery bank in a sealed compartment, LED lights outlets that worked when you flipped switches. Final touches on day 7, propane stove, properly vented composting toilet. Behind a curtain, bookshelves built into every available wall space, because Harper needed somewhere to keep the books that were accumulating faster than Rebecca could track. Harper became job foreman, directing traffic with the confidence of someone who'd learned that being small didn't mean being powerless. "Mr. Christopher, Mr. Kenneth needs you on the roof. Miss Margaret, we need more sandwiches." By October 16th, at 8 in the evening, the cabin was finished. Boat was transformed, midnight, blue hull, cedar cabin, everything functional and clean and genuinely livable. Michelle Roberts arrived at 4 that afternoon for her final inspection, walked through slowly opening cabinets, testing faucets, checking that the toilet actually worked. Harper gave the tour with practiced ease. "This is my bed with drawers for my clothes. This is the table where I do homework. See my math book. This is the stove where Mama makes oatmeal. This is our bathroom with the composting toilet that turns waste into fertilizer for gardens. These are my books. I have 31 now." The social worker asked the question Rebecca had been dreading. "Harper, do you feel safe here?" The girl didn't hesitate. "This is the safest place I've ever been." "Why?" "Because Mama's here, and all our friends are right there." She pointed to the dock where the crew was finishing cleanup people who'd shown up when strangers needed help, because that's what bayou people did. Michelle asked one more. "What if your dad wants you to live with him? He doesn't have a boat, and he doesn't have Mama." The social worker wrote extensively, closed her notebook. "Ms. Anderson, I'll submit my report to the court tomorrow. I'll be testifying at the hearing." She didn't say which way she'd testify, just left. October 17th arrived with the weight of everything riding on it. The hearing was scheduled for 9 in the morning Mississippi Family Court video conference from the Houma Public Library, because that's where the internet was stable enough for court proceedings. Brandon showed up in person at the Mississippi courthouse. Rebecca saw him on the screen suit, clean-shaven, sober, looking like someone who'd gotten his life together enough to be convincing. His lawyer presented evidence systematically. Photos of the boat in its original condition, listing, and rotted. Documentation of Rebecca's homelessness from late August through early September. Brandon's stability job in construction 2-bedroom apartment, 4 months sober, completed parenting classes. "Your Honor, I made mistakes. I was an addict. I wasn't there for my daughter, but I've changed. I have a stable home, steady income, family support. My ex-wife is living on a boat with our daughter. That's not a home. That's not stability. Harper deserves better." Rebecca's turn came with evidence that spoke louder than arguments. Michelle Roberts's report recommending custody remain with Rebecca. Photos of the finished boat, professional quality images Kenneth had taken. Letters from Kenneth as employer, Margaret as character witness, Miss Kimberly as Harper's teacher, reporting straight A's and social thriving. Bank statements proving financial stability. A video tour of the boat shot by Kenneth showing every detail of what they'd built. Rebecca's voice stayed level. "4 months ago I was homeless. My father had just died. My daughter and I had nothing. I spent $10 on a boat everyone said would sink, and I rebuilt it. Not because I'm reckless, but because I know how to build things. Harper has a home. She has a school where she's excelling. She has a community that showed up when we needed them. A home isn't 4 walls. It's the place where someone fights for you every single day." The judge took Harper into a private video call. 10 minutes that felt like hours. When they returned, Harper's face was calm, settled the way it got when she knew she'd said what needed saying. Judge Patricia Wilson looked at both parents through the screen. "Mr. Walker, I commend you for the changes you've made. Sobriety is difficult. Parenting classes show commitment. However, this case isn't about whether you've improved. It's about what's best for Harper." She consulted her notes. "Ms. Anderson, when this case was filed, I had concerns. Homelessness, instability, unconventional living situation. But I've reviewed the evidence. I've read Miss Roberts' report. I've spoken with Harper. This child is thriving. Harper's grades are excellent. Her teacher reports she's engaged, confident, happy. Her mother has demonstrated extraordinary resourcefulness and dedication. And most importantly, Harper feels safe. Custody remains with Ms. Anderson. Mr. Walker, you are granted supervised visitation twice monthly, supervised by court-appointed monitor, pending completion of substance abuse counseling and demonstration of 6 months continuous sobriety. The gavel sound came through the speakers. Case closed. Brandon's face did something complicated, not anger, but grief, mixed with acceptance, mixed with something that might have been relief that the decision had been made for him. Harper looked at her mother. We won. Rebecca pulled her daughter close. Yeah, baby, we won. Can we go home now? Yeah, let's go home. It makes you wonder what really makes a home. Is it the building, or is it the person who shows up every single day and says, I will fight for you no matter what? October 18th arrived with the kind of quiet that follows storms. The boat sat level in its slip midnight blue hull, catching morning light. Cedar cabin silvered slightly from the hurricane rain, but solid. Rebecca stood on deck with Coffee Ray's old mug found in a cabinet and scrubbed clean, watching the bayou wake up around them. Harper emerged from the cabin wearing her school uniform backpack already on both shoulders. Mama, what should we name her? The boat? She needs a name. All boats have names. Rebecca hadn't thought about it, had been too focused on making it float, making it livable, making it pass inspection. But the girl was right. Boats had names the way people had names, identities that mattered. What do you think she should be called? Harper didn't hesitate. Ray's Hope, because Mr. Ray hoped someone would find it. And we did. And now we have hope too. That afternoon, Kenneth helped them paint the name on the stern in careful white letters. Small brass plaque went by the door. Ray's Hope! Restored 2024 by Rebecca and Harper Anderson. November 15th brought Harper's 8th birthday. Margaret showed up at 4 in the afternoon with a chocolate cake, frosting dyed orange to match the girl's hair because Margaret believed in details. The community gathered Kenneth and Donna Christopher and his wife Donald, moving carefully, but present Miss Kimberly on her own time Robert, who'd driven from Mississippi again. Harper blew out 8 candles while standing on the deck, making a wish she refused to share. Later, getting ready for bed, she told Rebecca what she'd wished for. I wished we could stay here forever. Do you think that'll come true? Rebecca pulled her daughter close. I think we're going to do everything we can to make it come true. The routine settled in like sediment-building layers of normal that felt revolutionary after months of chaos. 6:30 wake-up. Rebecca and Harper raising the solar panel covers and checking the bilge. Harper's job, now something she took seriously. Breakfast at 7 on the propane stove. Usually oatmeal with whatever fruit Margaret had dropped off. School bus at 7:45. Rebecca worked at Kenneth's shop 8 to 5, officially on payroll at $18 an hour, learning the business side of marine repair alongside the technical work. Harper got off the bus at 3:30, did homework at the cedar table, while light came through the skylight, making the cabin feel larger than its 12 by 14 dimensions. Dinner at 6. Bath in the boat's tiny shower at 7, functional if cramped hot water, courtesy of a propane heater Kenneth had installed. Reading time at 8, Rebecca sitting on the floor beside Harper's bunk, both of them going through books faster than the library could keep up with. Harper asleep by 9, Rebecca in the bow berth, separated by a thin wall, but able to hear her daughter breathing, which mattered more than privacy. School transformed for Harper. Tyler got suspended for a different incident involving another student, learned boundaries the hard way. The girl made a best friend. Sophie Mitchell, another kid who didn't quite fit standard molds, loved science and boats and the way Harper's brain worked. Their science project in December won first place at the school fair, How Houseboats Float and Why Displacement Matters. Harper taught rope knots at recess, became the kid other students came to when they needed something explained in a different way than teachers used. She started drawing boats with technical accuracy, learning drafting principles from Kenneth, who taught her the same way he'd taught Rebecca, by showing her how things worked and trusting her to remember. Rebecca framed one drawing and hung it next to Linda's original sketches on the cabin wall for generations of women who saw water as home. Rebecca slept through the night for the first time in years, stopped looking over her shoulder, started thinking in terms of years instead of days, planning instead of surviving. The savings account held $45,000, $7,000 spent on materials and legal fees, but $45,000 remaining felt like more money than she'd ever imagined having access to. Kenneth offered her 40% equity in the shop partnership papers drawn up by a lawyer who owed him favors. You bring in customers. You know your work. You show up. That's worth something real. She signed the papers in November, first time in her life owning part of something that could grow. Ray's footlocker stayed under Harper's bed, brass corners, polished, now leather-oiled, holding the folded flag, and Ray's letter, and the empty canvas bag from 1974. Harper liked knowing it was there, liked the weight of it, the history. Sometimes before sleep, she'd reach down and touch it, connecting to someone who'd believed in her mother before her mother believed in herself. November 22nd arrived cold for Louisiana, 50 degrees and drizzling. Rebecca was at the shop, rebuilding an outboard motor, hands deep in grease and mechanical problem-solving, when Donna called her cell. "There's a woman here asking about Ray Phillips's boat," says she's family. Rebecca's stomach dropped. Family meant complications, legal challenges, claims on property that might override a letter in a footlocker. She wiped her hands and drove back to the marina faster than speed limits technically allowed. The woman was late 60s, well-dressed in a way that suggested money without showing it off, standing on the dock, looking at Ray's Hope with an expression Rebecca couldn't read. She turned when Rebecca's truck pulled up. "Are you Rebecca Anderson?" "Yes, ma'am. My name is Patricia Phillips. Ray was my brother." The words landed like stones. Brother meant blood. Blood meant legal standing. Rebecca's mind raced through options, none of them good. Patricia saw the fear. "I'm not here to take anything, honey. I'm here to understand why he disappeared." "They'd been estranged for 32 years, Patricia explained. Ray came back from the Gulf War, different nightmares, panic attacks, couldn't hold jobs, pushed everyone away. She'd hired an investigator last year after their parents died, needing closure, needing to know what happened to the brother who'd vanished from family gatherings and stopped returning calls. The investigator found Ray had died in 2018, found the boat still existed, recently restored by a single mother and her daughter. "I came to see what was left of him." Rebecca brought her onto the boat, showed her the journal, explained about Ray, knowing Linda Anderson. Patricia read slowly, touching her brother's handwriting the way you touch artifacts from people who've become strangers. Linda Anderson. He mentioned her once, maybe 88. I asked who she was. He said, someone who understood boats. I never knew her full name. She cried quietly while reading about her brother's slow salvation through saving money for someone he'd never meet, about the war that broke him and the quiet woman at a boat show who treated him like he still mattered, about watching Rebecca as a child and hoping she'd find her way to this boat when she needed it most. Harper got off the school bus at 3:30, saw a stranger on the boat, went immediately protective. "Who are you?" Patricia knelt to the girl's level. "I'm Ray's sister, Patricia." Harper processed this with her usual seriousness. "Mr. Ray had a sister? I was his sister. We hadn't seen each other in a long time." "Did you know he left us treasure?" The woman smiled for the first time. "I heard about that. Can I see what you've done with his boat?" Harper gave the tour with practiced confidence, showing every detail. Her bed with drawers, the table where she did homework, the stove that worked perfectly, the bathroom with its composting toilet, the bookshelves holding 31 books and counting. Patricia walked through touching cedar walls, seeing photos on the wall. Linda's sketches, Rebecca's childhood drawings, Harper's new work, the family they'd built from memory and strangers. She stopped at Ray's footlocker under Harper's bed. "Can I see it?" Rebecca brought it out. Patricia looked inside at the flag and letter, an empty bag, her face doing complicated things. "May I take the flag? It should be buried with family." "Of course." Harper asked the question adults wouldn't. "Where will you bury it?" "With our parents, in Cocodrie, next to the plot I bought for Ray years ago, hoping he'd come home." Then Patricia reached into her purse, pulled out a large manila envelope. "I came to give you this." Inside was an official property deed, notarized and court-filed, transferring boat ownership from Raymond Phillips, deceased, to Rebecca Anderson. Legal binding permanent. Ray never formally transferred ownership before he died. It was still in his name in maritime records. I had it transferred to you. Now it's legally yours. No one can ever take it. Rebecca's hands shook, holding the paper. Harper looked between them. "What is it, Mama?" "It's the boat. It's really ours now. Forever." Patricia's voice was gentle. "It stopped being my brother's the day you spent $10 on it and decided to fight. It's yours. Ray would want that." Harper hugged the older woman without warning, pure instinct, the way children hug when they recognize kindness. Patricia hugged back, crying into that orange hair, mourning the brother she'd lost decades ago and celebrating what he'd left behind. Margaret arrived at 6. With gumbo, she had radar for when people needed feeding. Donald showed up because someone had called him, couldn't miss the chance to meet Ray's sister. Christopher and his wife came, Kenneth and Donna, an impromptu gathering that turned into dinner on the dock, Patricia sitting with Donald while he told stories about the man she'd lost. "Ray fixed my engine for free once because I couldn't afford parts. Never asked for payback. Just said, Bayou takes care of its own." Patricia laughed and cried simultaneously. "That sounds like him. That sounds exactly like the brother I remember from before the war." Before leaving, she gave Harper a photograph, Ray at 20, in marine dress blues, actually smiling. "So you know what he looked like when he was happy." Harper put it on the shelf next to her bed, adding Ray's face to the family of people who'd saved them. December 15th brought deep cleaning day. Harper was reorganizing the bookshelf, getting taller, able to reach higher shelves now. She found a metal tin wedged behind books in a gap Rebecca couldn't have reached without a ladder. The tin was rusted-dented, sealed with duct tape that had fossilized over decades. Inside was a Ziploc bag holding maybe 30 photographs. Linda Anderson at a boat show in '87, holding up a design drawing. Linda and tiny Rebecca, maybe 4 years old, at a lake, the child holding a toy boat. Rebecca at 9 at Robert Miller's shop, drawing on receipt paper while her mother shopped. A funeral program from '98 folded carefully. Rebecca as a teenager working the marine supply counter. A photo of Robert Miller's shopfront from 2016. On the back of each photograph, Ray's handwriting in blue ink, Linda understood boats, 1987. Her daughter draws like she does, 1994. Linda died today, should have told her she mattered, 1998. Robert says the daughter is working for him. She made it, 2016. Harper brought them to Rebecca, who was fixing a net for Christopher on the dock. Mama Mr. Ray took pictures of Grandma Linda and of you when you were little. Rebecca saw herself at 9, completely absorbed in drawing, unaware anyone was watching. Saw her mother young and alive and smiling. Never knew anyone had been paying attention, documenting, caring from a distance. He was watching over you, Mama. They created a photo collage on the cabin wall that afternoon. Ray's photos alongside Linda's drawings, alongside Rebecca's childhood sketches, alongside Harper's current work. 4 generations connected by water, by boats, by the understanding that some things get passed down through blood and some things get passed down through recognition. Harper stood back, studying the wall. It's like a family tree, but for boats. What do you mean? Grandma Linda drew boats. You drew boats. I draw boats. And Mr. Ray saved all of it. So we're all connected. Rebecca realized her daughter was right. This was genealogy of a different kind, not blood but passion, not inheritance, but recognition, not family by accident, but family by choice and attention and care. December 20th brought Brandon. He showed up at the marina mid-morning, sober, humble, asking Kenneth if he could talk to Rebecca. Not demanding, not entitled, just asking like someone who knew he had no right to expect anything. Harper was at Sophie's house for a playdate. Rebecca met him on the dock, arms crossed, waiting for whatever came next. I'm not here to fight. I came to apologize. He showed her 8 months of sobriety chips bronze and growing the kind addicts carry to prove to themselves as much as others that time is passing and they're still clean. Showed her his sponsor's number, meeting attendance cards, stamped 3 times a week for 6 months, the infrastructure of recovery built 1 day at a time. The hearing made me realize something. I was trying to take her because I thought I deserved her, like she was a prize. But kids aren't prizes. They're people. And Harper deserves better than what I gave her. His apartment photos showed clean, simple, a bedroom, set up for visits that hadn't happened yet. Certificate from parenting classes. Letter from his therapist documenting 6 months of consistent work on trauma and addiction and learning how to be present. I'm not asking to change the custody arrangement. I'm asking if Harper would want to meet me. On your terms, when you're ready, if you're ever ready. Rebecca studied him, looking for the trap, the manipulation, the angle. Found only exhaustion and something that looked like genuine change, though she'd learned not to trust appearances. I need to think about it. That's fair? He asked to see the boat. Rebecca hesitated, then agreed to 5 minutes. Brandon walked through the cabin, taking in details. Harper's bed, organized with her drawings taped above it, the table with homework still spread out, the books, the warmth, the care visible in every corner. "You built this?" "We built this. Me and Harper and a lot of people who showed up when we needed them." Brandon's face did something complicated. "I should have been one of those people." "Yeah, you should have. Can I try to be one now?" December 21st. Rebecca talked to Harper over dinner, explained that Brandon had reached out, was doing better, wanted to meet her. Harper tensed immediately. "Is he trying to take me again?" "No, baby, I wouldn't let that happen. But if you want to meet him, we can do it here, on our boat, where you're safe, and I'll be right there the whole time." Harper thought for a long time, fork pushing rice in circles. "Will you stay with me?" "Every second." "Okay, I'll try. But if he's mean, we stop." "Agreed." The meeting happened December 27th, supervised and careful. Brandon brought a gift, wooden model boat kit they could build together. They sat at the cedar table while Rebecca watched from the galley, close enough to intervene far enough to let them navigate their own conversation. Brandon worked slowly, explaining each piece, letting Harper do the actual assembly. "I'm sorry I wasn't there before. I was sick, but I'm trying to get better now." Harper's hands were steady on the tiny pieces. "Are you better?" "I'm better than I was. I'm not perfect, but I'm trying." "Okay." 2 hours passed with minimal conversation, but no conflict. When Brandon left, he asked if he could see her again. Harper looked at Rebecca, who nodded slightly. "Maybe. We'll see." After he drove away, Harper leaned against her mother on the deck. "He seems different, less scary." "People can change if they really want to." "Do you think he really wants to?" "I think he's trying. Time will tell." They agreed to one supervised visit per month, phone calls once a week through Rebecca's phone, no overnight stays, until 2 years continuous sobriety. Harper called him Brandon, not Dad, and that was fine with everyone. December 28th brought Margaret's plan for a blessing ceremony. She showed up at the boat with coffee and beignets and absolute certainty that this needed to happen. "We need to bless this boat proper, Kidden Catholic style, New Year's tradition." Not just a boat blessing, a welcome ceremony for Rebecca and Harper into the community, making official what had become true through months of shared work and meals and showing up. The next 3 days were preparation. Harper helped Margaret plan the menu, learning Cajun cooking techniques that had been passed down through generations. Christopher gathered Spanish moss, draping the dock in curtains that moved in winter breeze. Donald arranged for Father Michael, a retired priest who was 81 and still showed up when the bayou needed blessing. Kenneth built a small platform on the dock for the ceremony. December 31st arrived with 60 people gathered at the marina. Biggest crowd the inlet had seen in years. The boat was decorated white Christmas lights along the rails, Spanish moss draped over the cabin white, and blue ribbons that matched the hull color. Harper wore a new dress Margaret had bought blue, like the boat fitting perfectly. Her hair was brushed into something resembling order, left wild because trying to tame it was fighting nature. Rebecca wore a borrowed dress from Donna, navy blue, simple, clean, the first time she'd dressed up since William's funeral. Father Michael performed the blessing in French first, then English, his voice carrying across the water. He sprinkled holy water on the bow while everyone watched. Bless this vessel and all who sail upon her. May she be refuge in storms. May she carry her crew safely through all waters. May she always be a place of peace and belonging. Harper whispered to Rebecca, "Is it magic?" "Kind of, baby, kind of." Then people started speaking, standing up one by one, with testimonials Rebecca hadn't known were coming. Margaret went first. "When Rebecca came here 4 months ago, she had $10 and more courage than sense. She bought a boat everyone said would sink. Instead, she raised it from the dead. She didn't just fix a boat. She showed all of us what it means to refuse to quit. We were waiting for her. We just didn't know it yet." Christopher spoke next. "She taught my daughter to splice a line last month. Took 2 hours patient as water, then fixed my motor for free when I said money was tight. Said, 'You've fed us for weeks, we're even.' That's bayou, that's family." Miss Kimberly's voice carried the conviction of someone who spent days with Harper and saw what most adults missed. Harper Anderson is the brightest student I've ever taught. Not because she's smart, though she is, but because she's been shown that hard work and love can build anything. That's a lesson I can't teach. That's something she learned watching her mother turn $10 and a dream into a home. Michelle Roberts stood up, surprising everyone. The social worker who'd almost taken Harper away, now testifying to something different. "I was wrong about this situation. I saw unsafe conditions. I saw risk. I thought a home had to look a certain way. Rebecca Anderson taught me that a home is wherever someone loves you enough to fight for you when the whole world says to give up. Harper has that, in abundance." Donald's voice was quiet, but carried. "Ray Phillips lived on this boat for 44 years, alone, quiet. I think he was lonely most of that time, even if he never admitted it. But if he could see this right now, this boat filled with people, filled with love, filled with purpose, I think he'd finally be at peace. This is what he wanted. He just didn't live long enough to see it." Rebecca stood because they were all looking at her, expecting words she hadn't prepared. Her voice came out rough with emotion. "I don't know what to say, except thank you. Harper and I came here with nothing. We found everything. We found family. We found purpose. We found a man we never met who believed in us anyway. And we found all of you. You pulled us up when we were sinking. You gave us a place to stand. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to deserve what you gave us." Harper tugged her dress. "Mama, you're crying again." Everyone laughed, the sound warm and accepting. Harper's voice rang out clear. "These are the good kind." More laughter, then applause that echoed across the bayou. The meal lasted 3 hours. Gumbo and jambalaya and etouffee and boudin and cracklins and catfish and hush puppies and coleslaw and potato salad and beignets and king cake brought early because practice mattered. Harper ran between tables with Sophie, both of them sticky with powdered sugar and joy. At 9, Harper climbed onto the platform, Christopher lifting her up. She held up a poster she'd made with Miss Kimberly's help, drawing of the boat and dock and community, everyone's face labeled with careful printing. In the center, Rebecca and Harper holding hands. Around them in circles, everyone who'd helped. In the outer ring, drawn lighter like ghosts, Ray and Linda and William. Title at the top, "The People Who Saved Us." Bottom line, "Thank you for being our family. Love, Harper." Nobody spoke for a long moment. Then Margaret started clapping, and everyone joined until the sound carried across the water. Midnight came with countdown and boat horn and illegal fireworks over the bayou, light reflecting off dark water. Harper on Rebecca's shoulders, both of them surrounded by people who'd become family not through blood, but through showing up. "Mama, this is the best New Year's ever." "Yeah, baby, it really is." 1 year later. December the 31st, 2025, the boat looked the same, but weathered midnight blue hull, maintaining its shine through regular care cedar cabin, silvered to that gray-brown color good wood gets when it's been properly treated and exposed to elements. Solar panels kept working, brass fittings stayed polished. The small plaque by the door had oxidized slightly, but remained legible. Ray's Hope, built 1974 by Raymond Phillips, restored 2024 by Rebecca and Harper Anderson. Rebecca was 28 now, full partner in Miller and Anderson Marine Repair. The business had grown Kenneth's expertise, plus her work ethic, plus their combined reputation for quality meant they had more work than they could handle. She taught boat repair classes at the community college twice a month, $45 an hour, discovering she liked teaching as much as doing. The savings account held $68,000, grown through work and smart investing, and living below their means because Rebecca had learned poverty young and never wanted to risk it again. She'd bought a small waterfront lot in Houma, thinking about expansion, about building a dock for larger repairs, about growing something that could outlast her. Harper was 9, turning 9 properly in November, though she acted older. Straight A's had become routine. Science fair, regional champion with a project on water purification systems. Best friends with Sophie. Their friendship, the kind that would probably last lifetimes. Learning to rebuild small outboard motors from Rebecca. Hands getting confident with tools. Mind understanding systems the way her mother's did. Still drew boats constantly, but now with technical accuracy that showed she was learning drafting from Kenneth. No longer bullied, she'd become the kid other students came to when they needed help, the one who could explain things differently than teachers did, the one with the boat everyone wanted to visit. Brandon had 18 months sober now, visiting twice a month without supervision anymore, because he'd earned trust through consistency. The relationship was more uncle-ish than father, but he showed up, which mattered. Harper called him Brandon, and that was fine. Recent visit he'd taught her chess on the deck patient and present in ways he'd never managed when she was younger. Margaret's restaurant had expanded to include a waterfront deck designed by Rebecca in her first real design project. $5,000 for the work proof she had an eye for how water and structure interacted. Legacy from Linda she hadn't known she'd inherited. She was considering night classes in marine architecture. Sunday dinners had become tradition, rotating locations, but never skipping. This week at the boat, next week at Margaret's, the week after at Christopher's house. Harper and Sophie serving food, getting good at it, learning hospitality through practice. December 31st evening, after Sunday dinner ended, and guests left, Rebecca and Harper cleaned up in the comfortable silence of people who didn't need to fill every moment with words. Harper dried dishes, movements automatic now. "Mama, do you think Mr. Ray knew we'd come?" Rebecca washed plates in the small sink hands in warm water. "I think he hoped someone would." "But do you think he knew it would be us, specifically?" She considered the questions seriously, the way you consider questions from children who deserve real answers. "You know what, baby, I think maybe Grandma Linda told him, somehow, From wherever she is, I think she said, "My daughter's going to need help someday. When she does, she'll find her way to water. Be ready." Harper absorbed this. So he was waiting. Yeah, he was waiting. I like that. Rebecca finally understood what had pulled her toward boats her entire life. Not just Linda's influence, or childhood drawings, or the work at Robert's shop. Something older, cellular, maybe recognizing safety in the way water held things up if you trusted it. Water didn't judge, didn't leave, didn't change its fundamental nature even when everything around it did. Boats were the interface between chaos and control, between being at mercy of elements and having shelter from them. Building boats meant building safety. This was what Linda understood, what Ray understood, what Rebecca understood now after 28 years of life. 9 o'clock found them on deck, watching the bayou settle into evening. Cold for Louisiana, maybe 50 degrees, both of them, in hoodies. Harper leaned against her mother, comfortable and quiet. "Mama, are we going to live here forever?" "Do you want to?" "Yeah, I like it here. It feels like home." "Then yes, we're staying." Harper thought about this. "Even when I grow up and go to college, even then, this is home base. You can always come back." "When I'm grown up, can I get my own boat?" Rebecca smiled. "You want your own boat?" "Yeah, but I want it next to yours, so we're still neighbors." "I think we can arrange that. Maybe we'll build it together." "Can we make it purple?" "We can make it whatever color you want." Harper fell asleep against her shoulder, getting bigger, heavier, growing up in ways that were both thrilling and terrifying. Rebecca carried her to bed, struggling slightly, with the weight tucking her in and kissing that wild orange hair. Whispered words Harper wouldn't remember, but Rebecca needed to say, "You're the best thing I ever built, baby." Harper's voice came sleepy and certain. "We built each other, Mama." Rebecca returned to the deck with coffee in Ray's mug, sitting in the cold and quiet, looking at what they'd made. The boat gleamed under dock lights, solid and safe, and exactly where it belonged. Kenneth's shop lights were still on because the man never stopped working. Margaret's restaurant was closed, but warmly lit, probably her doing prep for tomorrow. The dock where everyone gathered showed wear from months of community boards, smooth from feet pilings, marked with rope burns from boats that came and went. The bayou moved around them, dark and patient, holding everything up. She thought about the path that led here, William's death, and eviction, and Brandon's threats, and $10, and a rusted hull, and Ray's gift, and the community that showed up, and the hurricane she'd survived, and the custody battle she'd won, and Harper, growing up feeling safe for maybe the first time in her life. Some boats are meant to travel the world, Rebecca thought. Some boats are meant to stay in one slip their entire lives. And some boats are meant to teach you that home isn't a destination you sail toward. It's the people who show up when you're sinking, throw you a rope, and help you learn to float. She opened the journal she'd started keeping, following Ray's example. Tonight's entry went like this: December 31st, 2025. Harper lost another tooth front. One looks like a jack-o'-lantern. Hull needs annual inspection in March. Margaret wants me to design deck for her sister's restaurant in Thibodaux. Kenneth offered me 50% partnership. I said yes. Brandon visited, brought chess set. Harper beat him twice, and he took it well. This is where we begin. This is where we stay. This is home. If this story touched you, hit subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And tell us in the comments, what's the place that's been calling to you? What's your version of the boat? We'd love to hear your story. The bayou sang its evening songs, frogs and owls, and water lapping against steel. Ray's hope rocked gently in wake from something moving through darkness. Harper breathed steadily through the thin wall. Rebecca sat on deck with her coffee and her journal, and the life she'd built from $10 and stubbornness and the kindness of strangers who became family. The midnight blue hull gleamed. The cedar cabin glowed warm from inside. The boat sat exactly where it belonged, carrying them through calm water, asking nothing more than maintenance and attention, and the understanding that some things are worth fighting for, even when the whole world says to let go. She was 27 years old and homeless when she bought this boat. Now she was 28 and owned part of a business and had a daughter who felt safe and a community that showed up and savings that meant security and a future that looked different than any future she'd imagined when she was sleeping in her car behind gas stations and washing Harper's hair in bathroom sinks. The boat had taught her to float, and floating, it turned out, was enough. Not soaring, not racing, not impressing anyone, just floating, just being held, just finding the place where you were always supposed to be and recognizing it when you got there. Some lives are like that.